These are the most interesting vintage photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. Japanese women in the courtroom hiding their faces under braided hats. This measure was used to protect the identity of the witnesses. Wooden shoes with cow hooves attached were used in the United States in the 1920s to trick trackers. They were worn by cattle thieves to make footprints on the ground look like cow tracks, not human tracks. This technique made it possible to evade the chase and complicate the investigation of thefts. Burdash is a representative of the third gender among the indigenous peoples of North America, who combined male and female social roles. He often performed cult functions, being considered an intermediary between people and the spirit world. Fashion show in Venice, 1951. The models show 18th century dresses with black masks styled like Venetian carnival costumes. In 1972-1975, striptease was shown in the open air on simple wooden stages at traveling fairs in the USA. The dancers performed to the loud sound of speakers, luring passers-by. These shows have become one of the most challenging and profitable parts of the fair program. In 1969, activists from among the indigenous peoples of the United States occupied Alcatraz Island, claiming their rights to these lands. The occupation lasted for almost 3 years and became a symbol of the Indian struggle to restore historical justice. Alice Cooper and KFC founder Harlan Sanders are pictured together during an informal meeting. The contrast between the rock musician's outrageous style and Sanders' immaculate white suit made the picture iconic. Nintendo was founded in Kyoto in 1889 as a manufacturer of Hanafuda playing cards. At the same time, the unsolved serial killer, Jack the Ripper, continued to operate in London. The coincidence of the dates highlights how old the history of the Nintendo brand is. Mother Teresa left at the age of 13, 1923. The future Catholic nun and Nobel Peace Prize winner was born in Skopje and wore traditional Albanian clothes in her youth. In 1967, the youth of Arkhangelsk wrote a message to their descendants in 2017, expressing confidence that they would live better and achieve more. The authors described the construction sites, the transformation of the city, and the belief in the triumph of socialist ideals. Freddie Mercury celebrates his birthday in the 1980s with a cake in the shape of a woman's breast. Next to him are the members of the band Queen, Roger Taylor, John Deacon, and Brian May. In 1940, women from the British Union of Fascists marched giving a fascist salute. The organisation was headed by Sir Oswald Mosley, who advocated an alliance with Nazi Germany. The movement was banned in the UK in the same year after the introduction of wartime. The island of dolls, Isla de las Muñecas, is located in the Xochimilco area south of Mexico City. The area is covered with hundreds of old and damaged dolls hanging from trees and buildings. The place is known as a tourist attraction, with a reputation for being one of the creepiest corners of Mexico. On May 15, 1940, the first McDonald's restaurant opened in San Bernardino, USA. 5 days later, the first prisoners arrived at the Auschwitz concentration camp. These events took place on different continents, but in the same historical period. Vasily Petrov was the first to describe the phenomenon of an electric arc in 1802. He used his own fingers to check the current strength, since ammeters and voltmeters did not yet exist. To feel the weak currents, Petrov cut off the top layer of skin from his fingertips. The construction of the Berlin Wall began on August 13, 1961, to separate East and West Berlin. The building became a symbol of the Cold War and the division of Germany. The wall lasted until November 9, 1989, when it was announced that it would be demolished. Alfred Hitchcock and Alma Reville on their wedding day, December 7, 1926. The couple met at a film studio where they both worked in silent films. Their marriage lasted until Alma's death in 1982. Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible, is the largest surviving medieval manuscript created in the 13th century. The manuscript contains a unique full-page portrait of Satan. According to legend, the author made a deal with the devil to complete the book overnight and avoid execution. The minimum daily bread allowance in besieged Leningrad in October 1941 was 200 grams for workers and 125 grams for dependents. Bread was baked from flour with admixtures of cellulose, cake, and other substitutes. The photo shows a piece of such bread and a card that gave the right to receive it. A woman uses an industrial electric dryer, USA, 1920s. Such devices were bulky, made a lot of noise, and required caution when operating. This is one of the early prototypes of modern hair dryers. In 1963, Muhammad Ali staged a mock sparring match with a small fan, falling to his knees after his blow. This gesture showed his sense of humour and warm attitude towards the fans. The Masonic Lodge held a meeting in a cave in Arizona, USA in 1897. The photo shows members of the organisation in full dress. The place was chosen because of its symbolism and privacy. The funeral of Felix Dzerzhinsky, chairman of the Cheka FGBU, took place in Moscow in July 1926. Joseph Stalin, who personally helped carry the coffin, participated in the ceremony. In 1843, Alexander Bain patented the world's first electric printing telegraph fax machine. In the same year, about 1,000 immigrants travelled to Oregon along a new route known as the Oregon Trail. These events marked the beginning of the Great Migration to the west of the United States. Ekaterina Budanova and Lydia Litviak are Soviet fighter pilots who shot down a total of 23 German aircraft during the Second World War. Both were killed in air battles in 1943. Their names have gone down in history as a symbol of female heroism in aviation. Experimental Mobile Radio Communication Bell Labs, 1924. The device provided two-way voice transmission and was installed on cars. Technology has become the forerunner of modern mobile phones. Kalakaua, the last king of Hawaii, was elected to the throne in 1874 by popular vote. In 1881, he travelled around the world promoting Hawaiian culture, including hulu, ukulele, and surfing. His rule became a symbol of Hawaii's cultural renaissance before its annexation by the United States. The earliest known illustrated children's book was created in ancient Rome and combined learning with drawings. In addition to scenes of rural life, it contained recipes for winemaking and brewing. The publication served to impart knowledge about crafts and everyday life to children. Franz Kafka and his sisters in 1917. The writer is depicted in a family circle against the background of a rural landscape. The photo was taken a few years before his death in 1924. In May 1945, American soldiers leave inscriptions on the wall of the house where Adolf Hitler was born, in Braunau am Inn, Austria. The event took place shortly after the surrender of Nazi Germany. Such inscriptions have become a symbol of the end of the war in Europe. In Tutankhamun's tomb, archaeologists discovered knitted socks with a separate thumb and ornate sandals. This design allowed them to be worn together, combining comfort and the traditional shoe style of ancient Egypt. Brigitte Bardot in Cannes, 1953, with a camera on the beach. The picture was taken during the period of her first successes in cinema. The photo became one of the early symbols of her image. Piccadilly, London, 1910, a mixed traffic jam of cars and horse-drawn carriages. The period of transition from horse-drawn transport to motor transport. The scene reflects the changes in the urban infrastructure of the early 20th century. Children look at the bright posters of the Sylvan Drew Circus, Bristolville, Ohio, 1928. Tickets cost 25 and 50 cents. The scene conveys the atmosphere of waiting for a performance in a small American city. Chamber Cossack Timofey Box, a former bodyguard of the Russian imperial family in Copenhagen, 1925. He continued to accompany members of the Romanov family in exile. The photo captured the moment of helping an elderly woman get out of the car. Before his acting and political career, Ronald Reagan worked as a lifeguard on a beach in Illinois. During this period, he saved 77 people from drowning. This experience became an important part of his youth. An orphan German boy in Berlin, 1945, offers to exchange his father's Iron Cross for cigarettes. The scene reflects the devastation and poverty of post-war Germany. The medal became for him only a means of survival in difficult times. The bed on which Joseph Stalin was born is kept in his house museum in Gori, Georgia. The exhibit is a simple wooden structure with a woven bedspread and pillows. It has been preserved as part of the memorial setting of the early 1880s. Riga, July 1941. Locals greet the troops of the Wehrmacht who entered the city. The Nazi flag is unfurled in the foreground and people are making a welcoming gesture. The scene captures the first days of the German occupation of Latvia. Winston Churchill smoked up to 10 Cuban cigars a day. Despite this, he lived for 90 years, passing away in 1965. Doctors noted that his health remained surprisingly strong for a man with such habits. During World War II, the British Air Force hid the use of radars, spreading the myth that its pilots could see in the dark thanks to carrots. The legend quickly caught on and became popular propaganda. In fact, carrots do not improve night vision beyond the usual level. Adolf Hitler at a picnic in Essen, 1930s during the Weimar Republic. The politician is known for his strict vegetarian diet, which he adhered to even before coming to power. US Vice President Richard Nixon during a ride on the Moscow Metro, June 1959. The visit was part of his tour of the USSR, which included the famous kitchen debate with Nikita Khrushchev. The Anglo-Zanzibar War on August 27, 1896, lasted only 38 minutes, becoming the shortest in history. The conflict began over a succession dispute after the death of Sultan Hamad bin Tuaini. The British fleet quickly destroyed the Sultanate's palace and artillery, forcing it to capitulate. During the Great Depression in the United States, families sewed clothes out of sacks for flour and feed. Manufacturers noticed this and started producing bags with bright prints. So a practical measure has become a massive way to save money and keep at least a little style. In the 19th century, in the United States and Great Britain, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup was given to children to relieve pain and sleep. The drug contained morphine and ammonia, which made it dangerous to health. Despite the risks, the remedy enjoyed widespread popularity. Adolphe Sax, the future inventor of the saxophone, experienced many accidents as a child, including falling from the 3rd floor, drowning and exploding a barrel of gunpowder. He repeatedly suffered serious injuries and poisoning, but each time he miraculously survived. Despite this, Sax lived to adulthood and created one of the most famous musical instruments in the world. In 1937, John F. Kennedy visited Nuremberg during a tour of Nazi Germany. He was 20 years old and he studied at Harvard University. He was photographed juggling on a city street. On April 25, 1917, Dominicus Müller was seriously injured during an air raid in France. The event took place during the fighting on the Western Front of the First World War. The photo captured him sometime after he was injured. On October 8, 1940, residents of London take refuge in the tunnels of the Aldwych Underground Station during German air raids. These bombings were part of the Blitz, massive attacks on Britain. The station was used as an air raid shelter because of its depth and security. At the 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis, the winner was disqualified for driving, and a runner poisoned with strychnine was awarded gold, which was carried to the finish line. The Cuban postman fell asleep after rotten apples. The barefoot South African was chased by dogs. They gave him water only once, and the Russian team was a week late. Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder met in Detroit in 1962. Both musicians were blind, and by that time had already achieved success in the genre of rhythm and blues. The meeting became a landmark moment in the history of American music. In 1940, during the Battle of Dunkirk, British officer Jack Churchill shot a German soldier with an arrow. This is considered the last confirmed combat kill with such a weapon. He was also known for carrying bagpipes and a Scottish longsword. Churchill served in the British Army in World War II. In the 1960s, the CIA developed the Acoustic Kitty project, implanting an eavesdropping device for spying on diplomats. On the first test run, the animal was released into the street, where it was immediately hit by a taxi. The project, which cost millions of dollars and months of work, was closed. Alexander III, with Empress Maria Feodorovna and children, late 1880s. He ruled the Russian Empire from 1881 to 1894. The photo was taken during his reign. Steve Jobs demonstrates the Next Station computer in San Francisco, 1990. The model featured advanced graphics and multitasking for its time. Next computers were used in scientific and educational institutions. Elvis Presley, July 23, 1973, Memphis. He performed as part of a tour that took place after concerts in Hawaii. The period was marked by the singer's active touring activities. Chevrolet Vega and Chevrolet Vega Wagon Station Wagon, USA, 1970s. The model was produced from 1970 to 1977 and belonged to Compact Cars. Vega became one of the best-selling cars of its class in the USA of that period. In 1851, surgeon Joseph Lister performed a leg amputation, during which he accidentally cut off the fingers of an assistant. The patient and the assistant died of gangrene, and one of the audience died of shock. The mortality rate following the operation was 300%. Marilyn Monroe and Queen Elizabeth II were born in 1926. In October 1956, they met in London at the premiere of the film The Battle of La Plata. Monroe accompanied her husband, Arthur Miller. George Washington died on December 14, 1799, at the age of 67. The first scientific description of a dinosaur, Megalosaurus, was made by William Buckland in 1824. Washington, like his contemporaries, did not know about the existence of dinosaurs. Participants of the New York-Paris rally lined up at the start on February 12, 1908. The race took place through North America, Siberia, and Europe. It was one of the longest and most difficult car competitions of its time. Albert Speer shows Adolf Hitler a model of the German pavilion for the World's Fair in Paris. The picture belongs to the 1930s, the period of the Third Reich. Speer was the main architect of Nazi Germany. On October 20, 1965, the Ford Mustang was lifted, disassembled onto the roof of the Empire State Building and assembled overnight in strong winds. The car was delivered to the 102nd floor in parts via elevators to mark record sales of the model, more than 400,000 units in the first year. By morning, the convertible was ready for a photo shoot and filming from helicopters. Transportation of an apartment building across a bridge in Los Angeles, 1970s. Such movements were carried out entirely on special platforms. The method was used to preserve buildings during the redevelopment of areas. On May 24, 1977, the movie Star Wars was released in the USA. In the same year, the last guillotine execution in France was carried out on Hamida Jandoubi, convicted of torture and murder. This case marked the end of the use of the guillotine in the country. Félicette, the first cat to travel in space, was launched by France on October 18, 1963. The flight lasted 13 minutes and reached an altitude of about 156 kilometers. The animal returned to Earth alive and became part of the French space program to study the biological effects of weightlessness. The students of the Ukrainian gymnasium in Przemysl are lined up in the letters M and N. The picture was taken in 1942 during the German occupation. Przemysl was under the control of the general government during this period. Charlie Chaplin and Adolf Hitler were born in 1889. In 1940, Chaplin directed and starred in the satirical film The Great Dictator, which mocked fascism and Nazism. He played two roles at once, a dictator and a Jewish hairdresser. Pistons are the first leather shoes in Russia. They were made from a single piece of leather, tightening the top with a strap. Such shoes were common among peasants until the 19th century. During the years of Prohibition in the United States, poison was added to industrial alcohol by order of the government to prevent it from being stolen by bootleggers. This practice continued until 1933. It is estimated that about 10,000 people died from poisoning. Fidel Castro survived about 600 assassination attempts organized by various opponents, including the CIA. The attempts included exploding cigars and poisoned diving suits. None of them were successful. Meryl Streep in 1979, at the peak of her film career. In the same year, she won an Emmy Award and was nominated for an Oscar for her role in the film The Deer Hunter. Even then, she was considered one of the most promising actresses in Hollywood. Prussian troops on review at Versailles in 1871, shortly after the end of the Franco-Prussian War. The parade symbolized the victory of Prussia and the creation of the German Empire. Versailles was chosen as the place of proclamation of Emperor William I. A man and a woman walked past a burning building in Berlin in the last days of World War II, 1945. The fires were the result of intense fighting and bombing. The scene reflects the devastation and chaos in the city on the eve of the German surrender. The study of German Chancellor Adolf Hitler in the New Reich Chancellery, 1940s. The room is decorated in a monumental style with marble trim and massive furniture. The interior symbolized the power and authority of the Nazi leadership. A police photo of a woman arrested in Los Angeles in 1940 for homosexuality, which at that time was considered a criminal offense in the United States. The reason for the detention is explicitly stated on the card: lesbian. Such arrests were accompanied by public shame and social consequences. The first line of the London Underground opened on January 10, 1863, becoming the world's first underground railway route. At the same time, the Civil War continued in the United States, and the abolition of slavery was consolidated only in December 1865 by the adoption of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. The Colosseum, or Flavian Amphitheatre, was opened in 80 AD and could accommodate up to 80,000 spectators. At the same time, between about 80 and 110 AD, the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles were created. Both events relate to the same historical period of the Roman Empire. In 1896, Eugene Peirou made one of the first erotic films, Maria Goes to Sleep. In it, cabaret artist Louise Willy performed a striptease, which shocked the Parisian audience. The tape lasted about 7 minutes. The Hollywood sign appeared in 1923 as an advertisement for a residential area and originally looked like Hollywoodland. Over time, the last 4 letters were removed and the letters themselves became 1.5 meters shorter. Initially, he had nothing to do with the film industry. Hillary Clinton, a graduate of Yale Law School, was still a student at Wellesley College in 1969. During this period, she was actively involved in student government and civil rights movements. Fans of Elvis Presley at a concert in the 1950s react violently. Screeching, delight, and emotional gestures have become commonplace at his performances. The phenomenon of Preslemania swept the United States, turning the singer into a pop culture icon. The audience lined up in a long queue for the premiere of the first Star Wars movie in 1977. George Lucas's film quickly became a cultural phenomenon and one of the highest grossing in the history of cinema. Sailors of the British Navy participate in the traditional rum distribution ritual, 1960s. Until 1970, each crew member received a daily ration of strong drink. The crew of Apollo 1, Virgil Grissom, Edward White and Roger Chaffee, pose at the Cosmodrome a few days before the tragedy. On January 27, 1967, during a training session, a fire broke out in the command module, which claimed the lives of all 3 astronauts. A German soldier and a Soviet tankman exchanged cigarettes in September 1939, shortly after the joint invasion of Poland. The picture reflects a brief period of cooperation between the two countries before the outbreak of war between them in 1941. The Great Train Robbery is a 1903 American short silent film about 10 minutes long. It was one of the first films with narrative and editing, but it was not the first feature film in history. The real first full-length feature film is the Australian film The Story of the Kelly Gang from 1906. Anne Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were actually born in the same year, 1929. Anne Frank is known for her diary describing life in hiding during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. Martin Luther King Jr. became a symbol of the struggle for civil rights in the United States, leading the movement against racial discrimination. In 1833, Abraham Lincoln and William Berry opened the Berry Lincoln Tavern in Salem, Illinois. The business quickly closed down due to debts and alcoholism of a partner who had squandered supplies. This episode was one of the first unsuccessful entrepreneurial experiences of the future President of the United States. In 1942, Soviet puppet theatres used satirical puppets depicting Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels as part of frontline agitation. In the 1970s, the British police removed shoes from aggressive football fans before matches to prevent the boots from being used as weapons. This measure was used to reduce the level of violence in stadiums at a time of increasing hooligan clashes. Vladimir Putin with his parents, Vladimir Spiridonovich and Maria Ivanovna, in the summer of 1985. The photo was taken during his service in the KGB, long before the start of his political career. Pilgrims in Yokohama, Japan, 1886, heading to the sacred Mount Fuji. They are dressed in traditional bamboo kasa hats and capes made of straw mats, holding round utiva fans with calligraphy or drawings in their hands. German soldiers eat ice cream during their stay in occupied Belgium, 1940. The picture was taken shortly after the outbreak of World War II, during the period of the active advance of the Wehrmacht troops in Western Europe. Former Japanese Prime Minister Koki Hirota listens to the hanging verdict at the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. In 1948, he was found guilty of inciting militarism, planning aggression against China, and failing to take measures to prevent war crimes. Celebration of the end of the Second World War in Moscow, May 9, 1945. Thousands of people gathered on Red Square, where a large-scale fireworks display and a light performance in honor of the victory took place. Fidel Castro donates blood for victims of the earthquake in Peru, 1962. The disaster claimed the lives of more than 4,000 people, and Cuba sent humanitarian aid to the country, including blood collected from the island's residents. In 1971, Swiss women gained the right to vote in federal elections, 65 years later than in Finland, which became the first European country to grant this right. In the same year, the US Apollo 15 mission tested a lunar rover on which astronauts traveled on the surface of the Moon. From the 1930s to the 1970s, the Puerto Rican authorities conducted a massive sterilization campaign that involved about a third of women of reproductive age. The procedures were often performed without full informed consent, which caused international criticism. This case is considered one of the largest forced sterilizations in the history of the United States. Pablo Picasso and his wife, Russian ballerina Olga Koklova, 1919. They met while the artist was working on the sets and costumes for the troupe Russian Seasons by Sergei Diaghilev. Marriage had a significant impact on Picasso's work during this period. In 1921, the Battle of Blair Mountain took place in West Virginia, the largest armed uprising of workers in the history of the United States. About 10,000 miners rose up against exploitation and the prohibition of trade unions, which went down in history as a small civil war. During the Nuremberg trials, Karl Dönitz, the head of the Nazi Navy and Hitler's successor, was accused of unrestricted submarine warfare and the sinking of civilian ships. He proved that most of the targets were armed, and the United States was conducting similar actions against the Japanese. As a result, the sentence was commuted, and he served 10 years. One of the main supporters of prohibition in the United States was the suffragists. They linked alcohol consumption to an increase in domestic violence and saw the ban as a way to protect women. Suffragist organisations actively lobbied for the introduction of restrictions on the sale of alcohol. The absolute record for the number of children born belongs to the wife of Russian peasant Fyodor Vasilyev from Shwisky district. In the 18th century, she gave birth to 69 children in 27 births, 16 times twins, 7 times triplets, and 4 times fours. This case is listed in the Guinness Book of Records. Christopher Robin Milne and his Winnie the Pooh teddy bear became the prototypes of the characters in A. Milne's books. In 1926-1928, the writer created stories inspired by his son's games with these toys. The photo shows the original soft toys that became the basis of the characters. The model of Mount Rushmore depicts a future bas relief with portraits of 4 US presidents: Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. The monument in South Dakota was carved in granite from 1927 to 1941. The height of each head is 18.6 meters. In 1963, Japan developed a device in the form of a female breast with an imitation of a heartbeat. It was intended to calm and put to bed children who find it difficult to fall asleep without their mother. The invention relates to early attempts to create soothing devices for infants. The 12th President of the United States, Zachary Taylor, died on July 9, 1850, 5 days after Independence Day. Doctors attributed his death to gastroenteritis, which arose after consuming large amounts of cherries and milk at the festival. He was in office for only 16 months. During the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the teeth of dead soldiers were collected to make dentures. In the 19th century, such Waterloo teeth were valued for their strength and natural appearance. This method was widespread before the advent of porcelain and acrylic prostheses. Sergei Yesenin and Isadora Duncan got married in 1922. Their marriage lasted about 2 years and was accompanied by violent quarrels and loud reconciliations. The union of the Russian poet and the American dancer became one of the most discussed secular stories of that time. Fidel Castro visited the province of Quang Tri in Vietnam in September 1973. It was the only trip by a foreign leader to a zone recently liberated from American troops. The visit became a symbol of Cuba's support for Vietnam. A typical American family in 1978 poses among the products it consumes in a year. The picture reflects the level and structure of nutrition in the United States in the late 1970s. The photo shows a wide range of industrially processed and fresh products. Cages with songbirds, Shanghai, 1949. Breeding and keeping songbirds was a popular hobby in China in the middle of the 20th century. Such cages were often taken with them to parks for morning walks. Harvard University was founded in 1636, almost 30 years before the advent of mathematical analysis. A new branch of mathematics was developed by Isaac Newton in 1665. Thus, Harvard is older than mathematical analysis. USA, 1935, USSR Ambassador Alexander Troyanovsky and his wife. He was the first Soviet ambassador to the United States after the establishment of diplomatic relations in 1933. Troyanovsky held this post until 1938. Claudia Cardinali is a famous Italian actress and one of the most beautiful women of the 1960s and 1970s. She became popular after starring in the films The Pink Panther, 1963, and Once Upon a Time in the Wild West, 1968. Her beauty and charm made her a symbol of her time. Lifting the Fallen Stone of Stonehenge, England, 1963. The work was carried out as part of the restoration of the monument. The goal was to return the fallen element to its original place and strengthen the structure. The Jews of Vienna are washing the inscriptions about the independence of Austria from the sidewalks. The photo was taken in March 1938, immediately after the Anschluss. The action was a form of public humiliation staged by the Nazis. The Italian island of Poveglia, located in the Venetian lagoon, is officially closed to the public. In the past, it was used as a quarantine zone and a place of isolation for plague patients, and later as a psychiatric hospital. Today, entry to the island is prohibited by the Italian authorities. These two men with the same name were sentenced to the same prison and look very similar. However, they have never met, are not related, and are the reason why fingerprints began to be used in the judicial system. Under Stalin, disgraced or disappeared people were removed from official photographs. Retouching was used to rewrite history. This technique was used regularly in the 1930s and 1940s. For many years, miners in South Africa have been finding metal balls with a diameter of about 2.5 centimeters with 3 parallel grooves. Their age is estimated at about 2.8 billion years, as they are embedded in rocks of the Precambrian period. The origin of these objects remains unclear. The barricade in Berlin during the Spartacus Uprising, January 1919. The uprising was part of the German Revolution of 1918 to 1919 and was organized by communists from the Spartak Union. Fighting between the rebels and government troops raged on the streets of the city for several days. The 1850 hearing aid was a horn that amplifies sounds for a hard of hearing person. The device was made of metal or wood. Such devices were the forerunners of modern hearing technology. Crab meat cutters at the Vsevolod Sibirtsev floating factory in the Sea of Okhotsk, 1950s. The vessel was engaged in processing the caught crabs directly into the sea. This method made it possible to quickly preserve products and preserve their quality. Nazi Germany, the 1930s. In a racial studies lesson, a student in a white coat measures a peer's skull with an anthropometric compass. Similar procedures were used to promote pseudoscientific theories about racial purity. A map of Europe with the inscription Rassenkunde is visible in the background. Women's Military Corps of the Kingdom of Dahomey, late 19th century. These warriors, known as the Amazons of Dahomey, were an all-female unit noted for their high discipline and ferocity in combat. During the colonial wars, many French soldiers hesitated to shoot at women, resulting in significant casualties. The Miss America pageant in Atlantic City, 1920. Participants in swimsuits walk along the embankment during the parade, while cameramen record the event on film cameras. This competition was created to attract tourists during the off-season and quickly became a national tradition. Karl Bischoff, chief architect and construction supervisor of the Auschwitz concentration camp, before his execution, 1947. He was found guilty of war crimes and genocide. The execution was carried out by the Polish authorities on the territory of the former camp. Moscow, June 22, 1941. Citizens listened to Vyacheslav Molotov's statement on the German attack on the USSR on the street radio. This day marked the beginning of the Great Patriotic War. The photo is known as the first day of the war. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Franco Colombo, the 1970s. Both were bodybuilding legends and multiple winners of the Mr. Olympia competition. Their friendship and joint training played an important role in popularizing bodybuilding around the world. The ancient Hittites, 450 centuries BC, were among the first to use biological weapons. To weaken the enemy, they sent donkeys and sheep infected with tularemia to enemy lands. This caused epidemics and reduced the combat capability of enemy troops. Corporal punishment with rods was used in the Russian Empire until the beginning of the 20th century. They were used as a measure of punishment for peasants, soldiers, and convicts. The complete abolition of such punishments occurred in 1903. According to the original agreement with the Paris authorities, the Eiffel Tower was to be dismantled in 1909. It was planned to disassemble it and sell it for scrap after the expiration of its 20-year service life. The building was saved thanks to the use of the tower as a radio-telegraphic station. Albert Einstein died on April 18, 1955, at Princeton Hospital. Before his death, he uttered several phrases in German, but the nurse next to him did not understand this language. Thus, the scientist's last words remained unknown. On the ships of the Russian Imperial Navy, the evening prayer lasted about 15 minutes. After it was over, the watch commander gave the command, "Cover up," which meant putting on hats, and at the same time the signal to end the prayer was given. This ritual was part of a strict maritime discipline. New York, December 8, 1941. A boy from the Madison Square Boys Club carries a pack of fresh newspapers with a headline about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The day after the attack, the United States officially entered World War II. The photo shows the wedding of Prince Edward VII of Wales and Princess Alexandra of Denmark, 1863. The marriage was concluded for political reasons and became an important alliance between Great Britain and Denmark. Alexandra quickly gained popularity in society, while Edward became famous for his novels. On September 10, 1944, the USSR received the 5,000th Bell P-39 Airacobra fighter under the Lend-Lease program. The transfer took place at Ladd Field Air Force Base, Alaska, along the ALSIB Airway. These aircraft were actively used by Soviet pilots on the fronts of the Great Patriotic War. In 1668, during the traditional Fat Tuesday riots in London, brothels were damaged and attacked by religious fanatics. In response, the brothel workers sent a petition of poor whores to King Charles II's mistress, Countess Castlemaine. In the letter, they ridiculed the royal mores and asked for the protection of the Sisters of the Craft. Breslau, 1945. Sappers under the command of Sergeant V. Mozgovoy are crawling to deliver boxes of explosives to blow up a building turned into a fortified post by the enemy. They are covered by machine gunners from the windows behind. Strasse de SA Street became the site of fierce fighting during the storming of the city. The first book published in England in 1474 by William Caxton was about chess. It was called The Game and Play of the Chesser and was a translation of a French work on chess and morality. Friseute, Germany, 1945. Canadian military personnel disinfect released Soviet prisoners of war. The procedure was necessary to prevent the spread of infections after people were held in harsh conditions in German camps. In the 1950s, tobacco companies actively promoted cigarettes as supposedly healthy. Advertisements often used images of doctors and scientific experts to create the impression of medical approval. Such marketing techniques contributed to sales growth, despite the already well-known harm of smoking. Thomas Edison, with one of the first phonographs, 1878. The device made it possible to record and reproduce sound using a rotating cylinder covered with tin foil. The invention was a breakthrough in sound recording and marked the beginning of the audio technology industry. In 1917, Margaret Sanger, an American nurse and activist, was arrested for opening the world's first fertility clinic in Brooklyn, New York. Her activities violated the laws on obscene publications, which prohibited the dissemination of information about contraception. Washington, D.C., Mar 1942. women received ration cards for sugar at the Adams School. The introduction of sugar rationing in the United States was associated with the need to provide for the Army and the Allies during World War II. New York, August 1942. At the Pennsylvania station, military personnel and civilians are waiting for the train to depart. At the height of World War II, US train stations were key transportation hubs for the transfer of troops and supplies. Emperor Haile Selassie II of Ethiopia and Queen Elizabeth II, 1958. Selassie's visit to the UK has become a symbol of the strengthening of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Haile Selassie was one of the most influential African leaders of his time and a symbol of the anti-colonial struggle.